Being Featured is brought to you by Lucky Horseshoe, A&R Electrical Services, and Patient Spirit Productions.
My guest being featured has been singing well over 20 years, and her ability in jazz has led her all over the world. Her name is Rosemary Phillips. Rosemary, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. Hi.
Well, your earlier days when you were younger, before the age of 8, you were in Barbados, and then shortly after, you saw France. Talk about that experience.
Yeah, well, my mother is a linguist. She studied Russian, German, and French. And so she used to sing to me and my brother in in many languages and play a lot of music from all over the world. And she had an opportunity to do some research in France, and she took my brother and myself over there. But we came right back. This was after a year and a half there. So we were thrown in the deep end, went to school, learnt the language, and kept it going by going to Martinique, and then we went on to study in France later on.
And then the keen interest in jazz, how did you develop that interest?
Well, I think one day my brother gave me a jazz CD for a birthday gift, and it was Ella Fitzgerald.
Nice.
And I just love her voice and those songs and the big band, and I just was so inspired. It was just so beautiful. So I thought, well, I'd love to sing like her. I'd love to do this kind of music. Although, I mean, as I said, I grew up being introduced to all styles, all genres. So I just like music. But I thought too that I didn't have a big enough range to do pop per se. And I thought, well, I like these jazz singers who have the lower voice, you know, lower tones in their voice, and I thought that's probably more adapted to me. But the more I listen to these jazz vocalists like Sarah Vaughan and Ella, they have a huge range. But it somehow was encouraging for me, and I loved it. So I think that's where I got my biggest inspiration. Yeah, but I've always enjoyed singing all styles and in different languages. Yeah.
Well, you spoke about the range. But no, your tone, texture, vocal ability, I think is outstanding. Were there any special persons that you were working with over the years to develop the strength vocally?
Yes, I worked with Norma Bowen from Barbados, Doris Provençal, Alex Santoriello, who came into Barbados on the Broadway to Barbados. And whenever I met any opera singers, I asked for tips. I have a good friend, Claudia Nagivan, who's a German opera singer, and she helped me out. And when I went to Cannes, there was members of an American label, and they came up to me and gave me a great contact or person to look up called Seth Riggs. Apparently he trained all the great voices from Michael Jackson to everybody who's made it. And we often overlook Michael Jackson's voice because of his dance, but it's phenomenal. So it's something that Seth Riggs put out on CD, and I've really finally worked really hard doing those exercises regularly, and it's really helped increase the vocal range. I also met London vocal coach David Laudat. He worked with Lionel Richie, and he gave me some tips. And you know what's nice about modern technology is that some of these people can give classes over Skype and send MP3 files to work on, so you can be anywhere in the world and work on your voice with some great tips. Yeah.
And then eventually, you're not only a singer now, but you're also a songwriter. I'll talk about developing that skill.
Yeah, well, I always enjoyed writing poetry in different languages, and then thought, well, why not put these into songs? But what's interesting, the songwriting came just spontaneously. I grabbed a little voice recorder and had a melody in my head that was haunting me for a long time. And so I had these melodies that were coming out and then put words to it. And it's usually around moments of strong emotion, of great joy or great sadness, where I want to just express something. And when I had the great opportunity to be introduced to Belgian pianist Charles Loos. He actually said, let's do your songs on your, I was like, oh my gosh, really? So he listened to what I had and helped arrange, because I'm not a good writer. I mean, as in, I grab my voice recorder and sing the melody, and then I also get the lyrics, or sometimes it's the other way around, have the lyrics first and then melody. And so he helped co-organize, arrange the songs in a lovely way, because I can hear a melody and I can express it, say, no, well, I want this and want that, but then he writes it out, the parts for the musician. And to hear, we actually tried it live at Waterfront, because I helped coordinate a show where we were able to fly him in. It was a fundraising concert for the Duke of Edinburgh program, held at the museum. And so leading up to the museum show, or something happened that we did a show at the Waterfront, and he said, let's try your songs. And I was nervous, and I even had a music stand with the lyrics, and announced, well, I'm going to try my song. And it went down really well, and I gained confidence, and then it was recorded on my album with Charles Loos. And I'm very, it's a whole new feeling when you write your own pieces. Yeah.
Well, eventually you went on to study literature. You have a master's degree. You studied the lyrics of jazz greats. Could you talk about that research?
Yeah. Well, I've always been keen to know the history behind things. And when I met Dr. Carl Wade at the University of the West Indies and saw that he was really enthusiastic about the analysis of blues lyrics, I was intrigued to find a way to combine blues analysis in the socio-historical context and black feminism. And I focused on, well, I did a smaller paper on Billie Holiday, for example, her Strange Fruit, which is, I think it's one of the top 10 songs that changed the world. And it's one of these protest songs that came out that were very influential in making change. And that inspired me. And with Josephine Baker, it was interesting to look at the push and pull of her as an African-American woman preaching for equality versus the pressures on her as a black woman in Europe to kind of promote a colonialist mindset. So there was this struggle with lyrics imposed on her to launch her career versus lyrics that she could change and write. For example, she was able to talk about her dream, which is kind of in the spirit of Martin Luther King, of all nationalities, all cultures, all peoples living together in harmony. She adopted 12 children of different nationalities, one from Israel, one from, Algeria, and maintained their religion, encouraged the religious leaders to guide them through their religious practices from when they were. And really, in the 1950s, purchased a castle, and all these kids lived together in harmony, and people would come and see, is this really possible? So it was really fascinating for me to analyze these lyrics and her struggles for equality in that era. So yeah, I really enjoyed that journey.
Well, in 1999, you got the opportunity to work with the London Symphony Orchestra. I think that's a huge thing. One of the best orchestras in the world.
Yes.
How was that experience for you?
Well, it was lovely, but being modern times, they arrived with this thing pre-recorded and wanted my voice. It's Saint-Preux, who worked with the London Symphony Orchestra, a famous French composer. He sent out some music scouts in Belgium when I was there at the time, and I sang spontaneously in front of 1,000. There was about 1,000 people in the audience, and they all joined in a popular French tune that I knew, and then they said, we want you on board for our project. So it was 3 singers, including myself, and they wanted more of a spoken voice and they did a remix with a kind of hip techno beat.
Nice.
And it was poetry spoken, and it was on all the radio. It was all over the radio, and I was like, oh my goodness. Then they heard me sing afterwards. After I finished the recording, Saint-Preux was like, oh. So they encouraged me to come on tour with his daughter, who was kind of the equivalent of the Voice winners of one of the equivalent in Belgium. And so that was exciting, and it's true to be associated with such an amazing orchestra. But now I have the opportunity to work with 50-piece orchestra from Brittany, and doing the shows and going up with them all there, and the son of Dave Brubeck, Chris Brubeck. It's just an amazing experience, and they are hoping to record, and I have some more shows with them when I go back to France. So working with the big orchestras is a phenomenal experience.
Nice. And I think a year after you saw Adrian Clark, the outstanding pianist, you did an album with him as well.
Yes.
Yeah, talk about that album and talk how it differed from the first.
Yeah. Well, then what was good, in Belgium, I actually listened to a lot of recording artists and helped in the studio, and I said, you know what? And I was recording my voice for backing vocals for loads of greats in Belgium, and I was like, let me do my own album now. I would at least like to pay tribute to those great Caribbean tunes and add some of the stuff that I've been singing since I sing in French. Let me do a few Edith Piaf songs. So I was introduced to Adrian Clark, and I loved his style I love when we perform when he's on piano. But at the time of the recording in the studio we were in, there was just a keyboard, and it was a wonderful opportunity, and I really enjoyed it. I recorded like Welcome Morning Sun, Alverno del Congo's, as well as Emin Straker's beautiful Barbados. Blue Skies, a jazz standard, L'Avion Rose. So it was really an interesting melting pot of different cultures from the very first solo album. And Alverno del Congo came in the studio and recorded with me for Bridgetown Market, Gabby's tune. Gabby came into the studio at the time, heard it and went, Rosemary, you gotta put that on the radio, man. And I was like, really? Oh my goodness, really, you think it's good enough? And well, Alverno had been working with me on that, as well as David Nichols, known as Danny. Yeah. So that was one of the songs that went on the album. So it was like the first step to kind of get out there. I took that album with me to France, and the songwriter for Edith Piaf heard it and said, I'm going to give you original material that has never been released before. I love your voice. So it was a great stepping stone to do another album. And that was with Charles Loos from Belgium, with my original pieces, as well as an original from this world-renowned songwriter of Edith Piaf. So that was the next step. Yeah.
And then you went to Cuba. The pianist of the century, he's known in Cuba, Hernan Nusa. Talk about him.
Yes, well, what was lovely, I had met Hernan Lopez Nusa at it was the Cuban Film Festival. I think the focus was on Cuba, and it was organized by, I think, the Olympus Theaters. And so they flew him in, as well as Rigoberto Lopez, brilliant film director. And Hernan had composed the music for the film, Scent of Oak. It was just a most amazing film. It was really, and when I heard Hernan's music, it was a dream to one day record with him. There was no way I even imagined I would. But there was a get-together after the launch, and I went up and sang with him because he was at the piano. Gabby went and sang with him. And years later, I contacted him, managed to get his contact information, and he agreed to being the musical director for my album called From Bridgetown to Havana.
Yeah.
And the idea was to blend Caribbean and Cuban rhythms and jazz. So he puts Cuban and Caribbean rhythms into each jazz song and into one of my originals called Love is Like a Melody. And I revisited Bridgetown Market. I did Barbados, My Island of Dreams, which everyone just goes crazy hearing it. And so some good old jazz standards as well as that. And Besame Mucho. So I sing in Spanish, French, and English.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I think that also awarded you some awards.
Yes.
Earned you some awards.
Yeah.
Best jazz artist at the Barbados Music Award, also award in France.
Yes, best up and coming.
Yeah. How did that make you feel?
Well, I felt I was really blessed, and it was a combined result of a project called Voce and Voice as well, that they heard of my tour with this Martinican opera singer, and were like, we want to interview you, and we want to, you're one of our candidates up for this award. And when they heard the Cuban album as well, I was thrilled to be awarded this.
Yeah,
in
and
Paris.
then you have a project that is kind of outside, working with a French calypso band.
Yes.
I think that is pretty unique, and I think it will
Absolutely.
hit. Talk about that project.
Yeah, well, I discovered in Brittany, the northwest of France, that there's this calypso group, King Pepe and his Calypso Combo, and they record on vinyl, which is just usually, I guess it's coming right back. And they really have studied that 1940s, 1950s, old calypso. They love Kitchener. You know, they have been, and it was just amazing to hear the style that they do. And I let Gabby hear Arturo, they're like, wow! So I've been invited to record with them, and it's perhaps the start of a very interesting journey. And one of them, the leader of the band and the singer, Fabrice, he has never actually come to the Caribbean, but he's so, you know, captured the Caribbean in some of his styles. So I know it'll be, perhaps it'll be exciting to come to the Caribbean with that group. And there are some members, some people from Cuba in it, but it's really fascinating to have met them in Brittany. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, and you also had a short stint in theater and film, where
Yes.
you think you act in something called Tempers, I think it was.
Yes.
So talk about that.
Yeah, I enjoyed doing Aimé César's The Tempest, and playing Ariel, Ariel. No, I've always enjoyed theatre, always really enjoyed it, and it's a fabulous experience. And then to move into film is a whole different side. I find it a lot more, I don't know, I would say there's a lot of hours waiting, there's a lot of hours reshooting, and to me the energy of theatre it's totally different. I much prefer theatre, but the end result of film is really good because you can take it further and replay it, and you know. So my experience with film was less enjoyable because of the time, and I thought it was going to be a disaster because I had to put my masters on hold and I was stressed. But what's lovely with film is that I could hide the text here or there and glance down and then say it, and it somehow, when I saw the finished product, I was stunned and overjoyed. So but that was a first, and I look forward to hopefully doing more. Someone's looking into that for me in France. Yeah.
Well, before we finish, you have a concert coming up very shortly. Can you tell us what's happening with the concert, how plans are coming, etc., etc.?
Sure. Yeah, so it's actually through a personal contact, through El Verno del Congo, Verimbest. He was one of the first patients on dialysis, unfortunately, and but hung in there for a very long time, one of the longest standing patients on dialysis in the Caribbean. And so he told me of the difficulties, you know, when you're connected to machines for 3 to 4 hours, 2 to 3 times a week, and you're dependent on that to cleanse your body. And, you know, there's a great need for helping the dialysis unit. Sadly, one of the largest factors contributing to having to go to dialysis and kidney failure is diabetes. So you know, when I lost him as a friend to kidney failure, and then a friend called Linton, who was Guyanese, when the government could only do so much to help CARICOM nationals, but he couldn't keep up going to dialysis because of the cost. It's over 400 Barbados a session, 2 to 3 times a week. And when I discovered this, because I was overseas, that he passed away, I was devastated. So I'm particularly happy to help the Kidney Association that's really connected to the dialysis unit at the hospital, because they're working really hard. They've been doing cake sales, sponsored walks, just to try and help, you know, contribute to families in need who've lost a main income earner who is on dialysis, for example. And, you know, being able to support that association will really help. We need to really get the information out there of the causes of kidney failure so that we can reduce it. Apparently there are 4 new patients every month. There are over 500 people who have been diagnosed with some form of kidney failure. And so there's a great need. I think it's about 10% of Barbadians who have kidney problems. So it'd be really good to help, and I'm very happy that musicians can come on board to support this. So I'm really excited about the 4th of April concert at the Frank Collymore Hall.
Rosemary Phillips, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me, Joe.